Though the relatedness of the idiot to its purported model and source in the Quixote may have seemed, in the long run, sketchy or random, there is the matter of the body that gets cloned and recycled, renationalized and theologized, a body that returns and twists within the newer versions of a bad fit. Clearly, the absorption of idiocy into a text of decidedly theological inflection drove a troubled bargain for its author. With a sense of precision textured by the repetition compulsion, the novel repeats the disquieting exhibition of Holbein's Dead Christ. So I tried to choose something that would have a visual reference, so maybe to feed some need here. So there's the disquieting exhibition of Holbein's Dead Christ, which I would have loved to have behind me. The scandal of the bruised and bloody body of Christ refused transcendence. Dostoevsky is transfixed by the moment itself when custody of Christ's body is released to Western consciousness prior to resurrection. This body, though, has not been claimed, but repressed and forgotten. Yet there remains a memory trace of the forgotten trauma, and Holbein's imaging of the mangled body recurs through the text as a symptom that cannot be released. Reviving only the facticity of a corpse unavailable to any possible revival, it marks the moment of a dead Christ, Christ as pure corpse, intruding upon an unreceptive consciousness, like the real, an intrusion from which Dostoevsky himself feared he would never recover faith or religiosity. He'd stood paralyzed before the painting, Christ taken down from the cross, during the famous visit to the Basel Museum with his wife. The shock was transferred to his work, which tries to bury the irredeemably dead body. That is to say, the work, as place where the shock is meant to be absorbed, tries but fails to resuscitate the corpse, to glorify the body and lend it the cover of transcendence. This corpse, or this portrayal of Christ in the clutch of absolute mortality, is carried through the textual stations for review. It is at first only obliquely related to the condition of idiocy, though it spreads stupor to those in the work who come into contact with it. The eclipse of Christ, his reduction to a body that succumbs to its own destruction, haunts the pages, if not the essential construction of the idiot. Dostoevsky fixes and multiplies throughout the work the moment of sheer stupefaction that such a thought elicits. Point 02, the cry of abandonment. The idiot repeats and reworks the cry of abandonment in a disfigured world, evacuated by the sacred. A supplement to the existential primer of sacred departure, the work leaves behind a store of non-bequeathal. It is as though nothing can be inherited and there is little to be passed on to acknowledged figures of futurity. Growth and future are stunted, registers of pregnancy out of the question, leaving only a hemorrhaging of sense. The prince's innocence and naivete is in keeping with Christian Kenoticism. Kenosis, a theological term, refers to Christ's act of emptying himself on becoming man, humbling himself even to the point of enduring death, and in the process of becoming incarnate, surrendering all or something of the divine attributes. According to the thesis of G.P. Fedotov, the modern historian of the Russian religious tradition, it is the suffering and humiliated Christ who lies at the heart of Russian spirituality. Referring to the first Russian martyred saints, the Prince Boris and Gleb, Fedotov compares their meek surrender at the hands of their killers with the teachings of monk Theodosius, the founder of the Russian Kenotic tradition. Boris and Gleb followed Christ in their sacrificial deaths, the climax of his kenosis, as Theodosius did in his poverty and humiliation. From the outset, it must give the impression of weakness, as Theodosius's poverty must appear foolish to the outsider. I'm still quoting. Weak and foolish, such is Christ in his kenosis, in the eyes of a Nietzsche, just as he was in the eyes of the ancient world. So we're now looking at this light thrown on and the risk taken that by the Christian God who took the risk of appearing foolish. Our ears are still ringing with the laughter of the Nietzschean gods when faced with the last of their lineage, the one who posed in the guise of human vulnerability. He appeared. To appear is to appear foolish, humble to the point of provoking ridicule. He had traded himself in for a human body, weak and foolish, such as Christ in his kenosis in the eyes of a Nietzsche, just as he was in the eyes of the ancient world, end quote. If his Christianity was baptized by the idiot, it is small wonder that Nietzsche chose to inscribe the logic of being so clever, opposing meekness with cleverness, that is, and of countering the foolish idiot with the buffoon. Nietzsche, the first modern philosopher to put his body on the line, to write for and with it, prescribing distinct regimens and monitoring cultural habits, if not addictions, shares with Dostoevsky a certain acceptance of that which has been abjected, excreted by the major cultural codifications of corporeal enactment. Both writers perpetually return to the sheer facticity of bodily existence, but not so much as a mute actuality anticipating meaning by way of a transcendent consciousness. There is some of that in Dostoevsky, but it gets constantly subverted and remains merely a temptation, then as a kind of unassimilable scandal. Both thinkers bring forth the body as a massive disruption of inherited meaning, and in the case of the idiot, as an always imminent disorientation of sense. The body is in the world and pins down the vague locality of world, but when brought into view, it threatens the solidity of world. As with television, when things get very local, there is something uncanny and incomprehensible about materiality. It gets delocalized. The close-up of the body, which these thinkers permit, breaks with traditional modalities of understanding, which is why, in the one case, we are said explicitly to be dealing with idiocy. Idiocy materializes itself in a kind of negative corporeal stylization, yet it points to the generality of a human predicament. Idiocy has something to do with the nearly existential fact of being stuck with a body, or to put it differently, with the fact that the body has claims upon me. It is not only the case that we are largely but necessarily stupid about our bodies, whether or not they are seen to have functioned in so many ways as some signifying practice or are routinely submitted to a profusion of info tags, but that the body exists as if to mark the dumb impassiveness of our being. There is nothing to know and little to understand, maybe how to feed it, when to fast, how to soothe, let go, moisturize, heal. Mostly, though, there is no epistemological stronghold, no scientific comfort or medical absolute by which to grasp your body once and for all, as if it were ever merely itself, once and for all. One can only bear witness and offer testimony. This is why writing is so often bound up with illness, and why the writer and invalid are often secretly one.